Okay, so you saw the diffusion model. So let's talk about this. Does a cell use passive transport or active transport to move molecules? What do you think? Do they use passive or active? So, hold on. That's the question that we're going to be answering when we finish our notes. So be thinking about that question as we go through. So we're looking at cellular transport. Cellular, what am I talking about when I mean that? Cellular, what are we talking about? Cells, right? And transport, what does that mean? For transporting, we are moving. Good. So we're moving something maybe in the cell, out of the cell moving itself. Good job. All right, so every living cell exists in a liquid environment that it needs to survive. The plasma membrane is selectively permeable. Okay, selective. Are you picky or do you just let go and do anything? You're picky, right? So you're only allowing certain things to go through that membrane. Only certain molecules are allowed in and out of the cells. All right, so we talked about diffusion. I said that word. Okay, diffusion is particles tend to move from an area of where they are more concentrated to an area they are less concentrated. Okay, in cells, substances can diffuse across the membranes without requiring use of energy, which is passive transport. All right, so my molecules in my bottle of pine salt, okay, were they highly concentrated or not very concentrated? In my bottle, they were highly concentrated. There's a lot of molecules in there, right? Now, when I opened it and poured it, the air around it before it came in contact with it, was it highly concentrated or not very concentrated? Not. So we had high concentration in my bottle, correct? Yes, you can really smell it right here. But in the air, you couldn't smell it. So diffusion, the molecules of pine salt diffused in the air. They move from high concentration to low concentration in the air. So they diffuse. So this process can happen in a cell. Okay, this is called passive transport. So passive transport does not require any energy at all. So what's the energy for a cell? What was it, Tyler? The energy. ATP. Okay, so passive transport, you do not require energy, you do not require that ATP. Okay, so diffusion, keep that in mind with the pine salt. Now, osmosis is the diffusion of water. Okay, osmosis is the diffusion of water across a selectively permeable membrane, and it enables the cell membrane to regulate cells' internal environment. This is called homeostasis. So 2 words I want you to know. Osmosis, diffusion of water. Okay, so diffusion is just any molecules, really, from high concentration to low. Osmosis involves what? Osmosis involves the diffusion of water. Okay, so water is moving from an area of high to an area of low concentration. Now, maintaining that internal environment is called homeostasis. Have we talked about homeostasis? No? Okay. Homeostasis. Stasis. Are you staying still or are you moving? Stasis. You're staying. You want to stay in that place. Okay, you want to keep it the same. Homeo would be same. So we want to stay the same. Now think about this. Your temperature in your body is what? 98.6. Close enough. Good. So we want to maintain that temperature. Now if I go outside and it's freezing cold, what's my body going to do to respond to that? A shiver, right? Okay, it's hot outside now. How is my body going to respond and try to keep my temperature at that temperature? Sweat. Very good. That's homeostasis. A cell does the same thing with molecules, with water. Okay, and that's what diffusion and osmosis is kind of about, is maintaining that homeostasis. Now, osmosis affects cells depending on the type of solution they are placed in. You can have an isotonic solution, you can have a hypertonic solution, you can have a hypotonic solution. Those are types of solutions depending on what's in them. Sodium, water, it just depends. Alright, so some more types of diffusion. We have facilitated diffusion. Molecules that cannot diffuse in their channels and membranes. Okay, we talked about protein channels and the plasma membrane. And in my diagram up here, you can see the plasma membrane. And you can see my protein channel. You can see glucose going into the cell. So that would be facilitated diffusion. Molecules that cannot diffuse, they can't move through this area by themselves. They have to go through that protein channel. Alright, so we said we had passive transport. If you're a passive person, do you do much? No, you kind of sit back and just let it happen. If you're an active person, you use a lot of what? Energy. Okay, so active transport, you use energy. You have to have a transport protein carrier. Alright, so the protein requires energy. You're active, you require energy to help move particles across the membrane against a force, the concentration gradient. Alright, so this would be like me. It's highly concentrated in here, right? But the molecules, they want to get out. Okay, so if I open this, they're going to move to the lower concentration. Active transport would be me trying to force those molecules back in here. It's going to require me to use some energy, right? Okay, it's going to be hard. I'm going to need that concentration gradient. I'm going against it, not with it. I'd be going against it, so I need energy. Okay, so there's two types of ways to take things in and out of the cell. Endocytosis and exocytosis. Which one do you think is taking things into the cell? Endo. What's taking out? Easy enough to remember, right? Endo, you're going in. Exo, you're exiting the cell. So endocytosis. These two types are when you're taking big particles. Not those really small molecules, but the big things. Okay, endo, we want to take the large particles, and they are engulfed and then enclosed by a cell membrane, and it moves into the cell. So you have your cell right here. Okay, I want my particle to go in, so it's going to kind of puncture, not really puncture, but it's being engulfed by the cell and then taken in. You know what like a glob is? You know what GAC is? You know what that is? It's kind of like that. It's like a gooey oobleck. You remember doing that? Okay, well it's like GAC. Okay, it kind of engulfs it and you can't see it anymore. It's inside. Now exo, it comes in contact with that cell membrane. It creates a little pocket and then it expels it out. Alright, so, any questions so far? Let's go back to that main question at the beginning. We said, does a cell use passive transport or active transport to move molecules? Which one? Active or passive? Active. Active? What do you think? Active. Active? Active. What about passive? They don't ever do passive? Maybe. They do both. Okay, so sometimes they do active because sometimes they're going against that gradient. And passive, when it's going, like my pine saw, it's just moving because there's nowhere else for it to go. It's got to go out from high to low. All right, any questions? All right.